Our story begins during one of the darkest periods in Israel's history. For 40 long years, the Israelites lived under Philistine rule. The Philistines were powerful. Their armies controlled the land. Their soldiers patrolled the roads. Many Israelites lived in fear. Village after village fought against their oppression. It seemed no one could stop them. But while kings and warriors searched for answers, God was already preparing a plan. Far from the great cities and battlefields, in a small town called Zorah, lived a man named Manoah and his wife. They lived a simple life. They worked hard. They prayed faithfully. Yet for many years, they carried one sadness within them. They had no children. As the years passed, their hopes slowly faded. Then, one ordinary day, everything changed. A mysterious visitor appeared before Manoah's wife. This was no ordinary traveler, an extraordinary messenger. The messenger brought astonishing news.
You will become pregnant and give birth to a son. This child has been chosen by God for a special purpose.
Child was to be different from all others. He would belong to God in a special way. His hair would never be cut. He must dedicate himself to serving God his entire life. And one day he would begin to save Israel from the Philistines. The woman listened in amazement. Is this really possible? After all these years? After all this waiting? The messenger finished speaking and left. When Manoah heard what had happened, he couldn't believe it. The news seemed too incredible to be true. He prayed fervently, asking God to send the messenger again, and God answered. Shortly thereafter, the mysterious messenger appeared again. This time, Manoah hurried to meet him. The guest repeated the instructions concerning the promised child. Manoah listened attentively, determined not to forget a single word. Wanting to pay homage to his guest, Manoah prepared a sacrifice. As the flames rose to the sky, something extraordinary happened. The messenger entered the fire. Before their eyes, he rose into the flames and disappeared into the sky. Manoah and his wife fell to the ground in awe. In that moment, they understood. This was no ordinary messenger. This was an angel of the Lord. The promise had come true. The child was soon to appear. Months passed. The seasons changed. And just as the angel had announced, a boy was born. His parents named him Samson. They looked at the child and remembered every word of the promise. This little one seemed ordinary, but God had chosen him for an extraordinary purpose. And when Samson grew up, the Lord began to bless him. The years passed. The tiny baby who had brought so much joy to Manoah and his wife began to grow. And just as the messenger had promised, God was with him. Samson grew taller, stronger, faster. Before long, everyone in Zorah knew his name. The villagers often watched in amazement as he carried heavy stones that took several men to move. He helped farmers clear their fields. He lifted fallen tree trunks from village roads. Whenever someone needed help, Samson was ready. As the years passed, his strength continued to grow. But Samson lived in difficult times. The Philistines still ruled over Israel. Their soldiers controlled the roads. Their banners flew above their cities. Many Israelites dreamed of freedom, yet few believed it would ever happen. Meanwhile, Samson was becoming a young man. His long hair, which had never been cut, flowed over his shoulders. His broad shoulders and powerful arms made him stand out wherever he went. But no one, not even Samson himself, fully understood what God had planned for him. One day, Samson set out on a journey. The road wound through vineyards and rocky hills. The sun shone brightly overhead. Birds sang in the trees. Everything seemed peaceful, too peaceful. As Samson walked, the path narrowed between rocky cliffs. The trees became thicker. The shadows grew darker. Then something changed. The birds suddenly stopped singing. The wind seemed to disappear. The entire valley fell silent. Samson slowed his steps. Something wasn't right. Hidden among the bushes nearby, a predator was watching. Golden eyes stared through the leaves, muscles tensed. Sharp claws dug into the earth. And then, a terrifying roar shattered the silence. A massive lion burst from the bushes and charged straight toward Samson. The beast was enormous. Its mane flashed in the sunlight. Its teeth were as sharp as knives, and there was nowhere to run, no weapon to grab, no one nearby to help, only Samson and the lion. Several weeks later, Samson traveled along the same road once again. As he passed through the valley, he remembered the lion he had defeated. Curious, he walked over to where the beast had fallen. There, among the grass, lay the lion's remains. But something strange had happened. A swarm of bees had made a hive inside the carcass, and deep inside was honey. Samson could hardly believe it. Honey, inside a lion. He tasted some and continued on his journey, but the unusual discovery stayed in his mind. Soon it would inspire a riddle that would leave an entire group of Philistines scratching their heads. Not long after defeating the lion, Samson traveled to the Philistine town of Timnah. There he met a young Philistine woman and decided he wanted to marry her. Soon a great wedding feast was prepared. Guests arrived from across the region. 30 Philistine men were chosen to accompany Samson during the celebration. As the feast began, Samson challenged them with a riddle inspired by his strange encounter with the lion. He said,
"Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet."
The Philistines were puzzled. For days they tried to solve the riddle, but no one could. As the final day approached, they became desperate. Secretly, they threatened Samson's bride. Frightened, she begged Samson to reveal the answer. Eventually, Samson gave in. She immediately told the Philistines. When they proudly revealed the answer, Samson knew exactly what had happened. He had been betrayed. Furious, Samson left the feast. Later, he returned for his bride. But another shock awaited him. Her father had already given her to another man. Samson was enraged. This time, he would not let the Philistines get away with it. He captured hundreds of foxes, tied them together in pairs, and fastened burning torches to their tails. Then he released them into the Philistine fields. The animals raced through the grain, vineyards, and olive groves. Within moments, flames spread everywhere. Field after field erupted into fire. By sunset, much of the Philistines' harvest had been destroyed. The Philistines were furious. Their fields were devastated. Their crops were ruined. Determined to take revenge, they attacked and killed Samson's wife and her father. When Samson learned what had happened, his anger burned even more. He struck with great force, defeating many Philistine warriors. Then he withdrew and hid in the mountains. But the Philistines were not yet defeated. Soon, thousands of soldiers entered the land of Judah, searching for Samson. The people were terrified. Fearing what might happen, 3,000 Judahites set out to search for him. They begged Samson to surrender. Surprisingly, Samson agreed. He allowed them to bind him with new ropes and hand him over to the Philistines. The Philistine army cheered when they saw him. Finally, their greatest enemy had been captured, but they celebrated too soon. As the soldiers rushed toward him, Samson suddenly ripped the ropes as if they were threads. The Philistines froze in shock. Looking around, Samson spotted the jawbone of a donkey lying on the ground. He picked it up. Then he charged straight at the army, one against thousands. The battle had begun. The Philistines could hardly believe their eyes. Only moments earlier, Samson had been their prisoner. Now the ropes lay broken on the ground. Panic spread through the army. Soldiers rushed toward him from every direction. As the Philistines attacked, Samson charged forward. The battle was fierce. Again and again, the soldiers rushed at him. Again and again, Samson drove them back. Dust filled the air. Cries echoed across the valley. The Philistines had come expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves facing the strongest man they had ever seen. By the time the battle was over, the army had been completely defeated. The valley fell silent. Samson stood alone among the fallen warriors. Exhausted and thirsty, he looked toward the sky. God answered his need and provided water nearby. Once again, Samson had escaped the Philistines, but his greatest challenges were still ahead. Far away, in the Philistine city of Gaza, new enemies were already making plans. Over the years, Samson remained the Philistines' greatest enemy. They tried to defeat him several times. They failed several times. Then a woman named Delilah appeared in Samson's life. The Philistine rulers saw an opportunity. They secretly approached Delilah and offered her a great reward if she could discover the secret of Samson's strength. Delilah agreed. She repeatedly asked Samson where his strength came from. Each time, Samson gave a different answer. Each time it was a trick, and each time, Samson escaped. But Delilah didn't give up. Day after day, she continued asking. Slowly, Samson began to let down his guard. The Philistines waited patiently. They knew that sooner or later, Samson would reveal his secret. One day, Samson finally revealed his secret. He told Delilah that his hair had never been cut. It was the sign of the special promise made before he was born. That night, as Samson slept, Delilah called for the Philistines. Quietly, they entered the room. As he slept, his hair was cut. For the first time in his life, Samson's strength left him. Moments later, Philistine soldiers rushed in. Samson jumped to his feet and tried to fight, but something was wrong. His strength was gone. The Philistines quickly overpowered him. At last, the man they had feared for so many years had been captured. They chained him and carried him away to Gaza. The people celebrated. The rulers rejoiced. They believed Samson was finished, but they were about to make a terrible mistake. The Philistines were certain that Samson's story was over. They threw him into prison. Day after day, he was forced to work while crowds mocked him. The man who had once defeated armies was now a prisoner. But while Samson sat in prison, something began to change. His hair slowly started to grow again. Months passed. Then one day, the Philistines held a great celebration in honor of their god, Dagon. Thousands of people gathered inside a huge temple. The rulers of the Philistines were there. The soldiers were there. The crowds filled every corner of the building. They wanted to see the man who had once terrified them. So Samson was brought from prison and led into the temple. The people laughed. They pointed at him. They celebrated what they believed was their greatest victory. But they had no idea what was about to happen. Standing inside the temple, Samson noticed two massive pillars supporting the structure. Slowly, he moved toward them. Then he prayed. For one final time, he asked God for strength, a strength unlike anything he had ever known. Samson placed his hands against the pillars. The stone began to groan. The pillars started to move. At first, nobody noticed. Then cracks appeared in the walls. The ground trembled. The laughter stopped. The celebration turned into panic. People began shouting. The temple shook violently. And with one final push, Samson brought the entire building down. The massive temple collapsed. The rulers of the Philistines were buried beneath the ruins. The crowd scattered in terror. After a lifetime of battles, Samson's story had come to an end. He was not a perfect hero. He made mistakes, many mistakes. But God still used him to challenge the enemies of Israel. And centuries later, people would still remember the man whose strength became legendary. The man called Samson.